Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. I don't do this very often, but I have a dual person interview today, and I couldn't be more thrilled because the topics that Gregg Murphy and Mike Latch are going to discuss with us are of big importance. Well, number one, I want to hear about your backstory because you met in solar, and we know that there's so much conversation around being sustainable, all of the climate change issues, all of those things. But you also now live in the world of AI, which has its own issues with how much power it takes to power the language modeling and continue the process of using, utilizing, and expanding our capabilities with AI. And then you also have an amazing book coming out because you kind of meet at the intersection of sales, which is something that people often are scared of and think of it as a dirty word. So thank you both for being here.
Great to be here. Yeah, thanks for having us on again.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So I was reading that you started out, no sales experience, electrician, engineering, like your mind is that analytical space that mine is not quite that analytical, and I could never be a physicist or an engineer, I don't think. And then Gregg, you came from the side of optimization, teams, and not a tech background. So I would love to hear how the two of you met, because now you've had this friendship and partnership for 15 years through various companies.
Mike, you want to jump in on that one, buddy? Yeah, sure. Sorry, we met at a residential solar company in Hawaii, where I moved out there to go to grad school from the West Coast. And long story short, got introduced to some owners of the residential and commercial solar company. So that's a company that comes into your home and says, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, would you like a solar system? Or thank you for being interested, and goes through that process and then installs it on your house and all that kind of good stuff. And Gregg was the sales manager there. And long story short, I ended up meeting the owners, and they're like, hey, we can offer you a job in sales. And it's like, sales? Like that? Same sort of thing. Like, is there something bad about me that you think that I would be a good fit for a sales position? And then Gregg was the sales manager there. And that's how we first met. And we'll probably talk during this conversation a lot more of those details. But that's how we met. He was my boss for my very first sales job ever.
Mike, I'm going to tell a different side of the story if you don't mind.
So that you fired me before my first day?
Oh, wow. Okay. Let's hear this.
That's a true story. It's like, so one of the owners of the company, he said, hey, I got this great guy, super smart. He's a physicist and he's going to help us do amazing things, but want to have him come into sales. And so please bring him on in sales. And so I talked to Mike, and by the conversation you've already heard already, he sounded a bit like cyborg-ish. So we say he's kind of a human, half cyborg. We're not really sure. And I say that joking. He's a very smart man, but he didn't seem like he'd be able to come across well to customers in sales. And so we joked that on his first day, I fired him, but quickly realized that we had a very successful sales process. And Mike was able to take our sales process and just profoundly change the future of sales actually for that company, because zero sales experience became not just the number one sales rep at the company, but actually nationwide. And people asked him, how did you do it? Well, I just followed a simple...
Yeah, like I did what Gregg told me. That was literally that.
So we built a great relationship. Then Mike quickly transitioned from sales to help us build a sales enablement tool that helped customers make a decision along the way. And so we've kind of been at the hip through the years in businesses together and supporting each other in business together. And here we are again, really focused on sales enablement.
Yeah.
It's been a blast.
Well, I love that story. And I love the fact that you also were like, what is wrong with me that you're going to put me in a sales role? Because that is often, people either love sales or they hate it. Same thing with public speaking, right? You either really love it, maybe you can grow to love it, but usually there's an innate inner sense, something I want to do.
Most people don't love it. In my family, my father was an engineer, both grandfathers. Like the sales and marketing is especially sales, like a bad word sort of thing. And so it was pretty neat. I got really lucky, and then I met Gregg, and that was my first experience. And then he's like, hey, Mike, you're a clever fellow, but don't talk about how solar panels work. I have a great way to explain this to folks that they understand. It helps them make a decision that's in their own best interest, whether they decide to purchase or not. And he's like, just follow the process. So it was pretty neat that I got exposed to that, the super ethical and effective way that also scales, which later kind of what I know about technology and all that kind of stuff was useful for taking those concepts and then getting many more humans to replicate those ethical and effective like processes and conversations and things like that.
Well, what I'm also hearing is that mentorship was really important. And that's something that Gregg was able to give you. And I love the fact that you use the word ethical, because a lot of times people don't pair sales with ethics. And we know that in today's age of marketing, I don't do much of the sales side, but everything is selling. Anything we do in marketing and to showcase somebody really is sales, or it's on the roadmap, right? Part of the customer journey.
100%. And it's that part of that for most people that you feel like you have to shower after you talk to a salesperson. You just don't feel good, right? It's like the strategy that a lot of firms utilize is, this term out there. It's the worst term I've ever heard in my life. It's called buyers or liars. I don't know if you ever heard about it, but there's this way that people approach it. A lot of sales managers coach that. I'm going like, why would a buyer be a liar? What a horrible way to hold people that it's a potential customer, right? And so really what they've done is, because almost all of us, right, have been manipulated by a salesperson where it didn't feel good. It didn't feel right, right? And so they're trained people who are coming in and trying to pitch their product and to get you to make decisions, but they're using it through coercion and manipulation tactics as opposed to like leading questions and pushing you against the corner. And we've created a process that's really focused on selling, a term we use like selling with aloha. How do you help people make decisions, to do the right thing, and make them feel good about the decisions they've made? Or you can jump onto what we've built. That's kind of really a good idea to look at what makes sales suck, right? Right.
Yeah.
And that's really, we outline a lot of that in our book there. It's about sales sucks. And it's because what our goal is, we want to change how people sell and interact with people. And we've seen incredible success by doing that.
So fundamentally, Annika, you're an expert in the field, obviously pretty clever person. So, you like other sophisticated people in sales and marketing, I'm sure get that incentives make sense, right? Why a salesperson would behave in a not particularly nice manner or suboptimal manner. People joke that I use the word suboptimal, but the incentives are clearly there to misbehave, right? Because they might make a sale and make a commission and maybe they don't see that customer again or something like that. And so, it makes sense why a lot of that behavior is replicated in all kinds of different places. And that was what I was exposed to, right? That sort of concept but at least for like strategic sales, like what Gregg and I, like when there's like something complicated, configurable, and you kind of go through a conversation to configure something for a purchaser, it turns out there is a very, very straightforward way where you don't have to do any of that, like manipulation or shady stuff. You figure out things that are important, make sure it's explained clearly, make sure things make sense as you go along. It turns out, you can create software that really helps the average sales rep human give experiences like top reps. But what we found at later companies that scaled much, much bigger was that my limited sales experience, it was pretty successful. Like it was actually atypical. So I'm like, hey, there's a very straightforward way for us all to be proud of ourselves and to grow like gangbusters. And here's how to do it. And when we ended up explaining that so many times to so many different people that we were like, dude, we should just write a book. And like, there's a lot of people that should be doing this. Like the only reason they haven't been exposed to it. And those incentives to make money cause them to continue to misbehave. And they probably wouldn't if they were exposed to the stuff they learned from Gregg and how to scale it with tech and stuff. Sorry, that might've been a lot, but I was trying to add useful information.
You can tell you're really passionate about it. And I think it's really easy to see why the two of you make great partners, because you come from this very technical side where you can see I can take these constructs that Gregg has helped teach me and shown me are really successful ways to sell where I don't have to feel like I have to shower afterwards.
Yeah.
And we can create this path because there are a lot of people out there trying to sell systems where they're like, oh, this really worked for me and it can replicate it for you. But then that's not necessarily the case. But you've been able to use this model in different companies as well, different organizations say, we really have something here. And then now that's why you have Patter AI, right? Your company. And then also sales suck.
Yeah, that's right. There's a good Venn diagram between Gregg and I that works pretty neat at organizations and stuff like that.
Yeah. It's like a lot of it is we wanted to back to what Michael's saying is that the more that a salesperson can make, the more potential for manipulation to get what they want, right? And so what we found is that asking leading questions, we make this joke here, where sales reps will say something like, hey, by the way, homeowner, we sell baby safe tires. And for just 17 lattes more, the cost of 17 lattes, you can keep your baby safe. You wouldn't want anything bad to happen to your baby, would you? Like, joking, but that's the ridiculous ways that people talk to people in sales. And so we found that we like to focus on, it's really process. And so when we talk about scripting, a lot of people cringe by it because a lot of the processes are just that, these leading manipulative questions. And so what Mike's been able to do is I've been able to develop these processes and scripts. And then Mike has come alongside and taken software to help me visualize and help us present and the homeowner to visualize what it is they're actually getting and buying and doing with highly configurable systems, very complicated sales processes, right? Much different than going to a store and buying a candy bar. They're all there. Which one do you want? Pick it, right? This is a lot of times the customer doesn't know what they want. And so we have to make that decision-making process very, very simple. And we've done it. Part of the Mike transitioned on and built a software company and then asked me to come on to help him build this company. When they got to a certain level, he took them to a certain level where the software just literally, and I would probably talk about, changed the business overnight. But then he needed to bring in sales processes on top of that to just exponentially grow the business. And when I joined, we took it from 300 sales reps to 1,000 sales reps in 2 years. And then from about $300 million in sales to just over $1 billion a run rate in about 2 years. And we did it well. And that's what our hope is. How do we train and develop people to understand how to help people make decisions in a non-cringe way?
Yeah, non-cringe way. So the last company that we helped grew to around 5,000 people or so. It's not a giant company, it's not like IBM or Ford Motor Company or something like that. But what we found was something that was so straightforward in my own mind and a straightforward way to scale on the human sales force and without an unacceptable degradation in their performance as you onboard a new person and get them trained up. In my mind, it was very straightforward on how to do that without limitation, right? There's no upper limit on the number of people that you can have performing acceptably. But that outlook exists almost zero in any other people. So the whole idea with the book was like, hey, we don't need to be the only people that are doing this. Like, here's how to do it. Like, here's how to create your first set of scripts. Here's how to, if you're a certain size, here's how to augment that with tech. If you're following all these steps, here's how the intermediate layers of sales leadership can behave and perform to keep it all, running within acceptable parameters. It's not mysterious at all, but I encountered so many companies that it seemed like so much of an art. Sales seemed like it was either cringy or shady or an art, and it doesn't have to be that way. So the whole idea of the book is to just give all that information and make it helpful for people if they haven't been exposed to these concepts.
Well, and I'd love to talk about, because I heard you both say that this strategy is not for just going to the store and deciding between candy bar A and candy bar B, right? This is something that is much more intensive, and it's for perhaps different kinds of organizations that might be more complex, more technological, where people are making perhaps bigger buying decisions. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. Who is your ideal audience? Who uses your AI system currently? And how much of that is woven into the book?
I want to jump into the how, and then I'll have Mike talk about really like the type of customers we're working with there. But we literally, anybody that has strategic sales, a complicated sales process, right? That there's a lot of decisions for a customer to make. This process will absolutely work wonders for. If you're a startup, you're just starting, how do I generate a sales process? This absolutely would help people walk through that. So no matter what scale you are, that's what we found is like treating people with respect just goes a mile, many, many miles, right? But we really focused on the middle class of a sales team. So let's say you have 10 salespeople or 100 salespeople. Most sales organizations focus on that top performer who is just, they're very confident. They're very just like charismatic. They could change the energy of a room when they walk in. But that's only 1% to 2% of a sales org. And so what we found is we want to focus on that middle class. If I could just generate, which is the largest, right? Think about like a tax basis, the largest class in the sales team, if I can generate 1 to 2 more sales out of those people a month, it could change the dynamic of the company forever. And so what we found is that by creating I talk a little bit down the road about decision-making business. That's what sales really is. We're helping customers make decisions is all we're doing. I'm not trying to manipulate or anything or make them buy. And so by doing that and creating a software that actually enables a sales rep, let's say they had a hard night the night before, emotionally, they're going through troubled times, where a confident salesperson would come in there and they just walk over it. They'd be fine. But they're feeling a little low. We wanted to create a process that they could literally open up the computer, look at the screen, and go, oh, they just need to make a decision here and here. Does that make sense? Turn the page. Talk about this, talk about that. Does that make sense? And sound very competent and confident, even though their emotions aren't. Even though their headspace is probably off, we enabled the middle class to show up like rock stars. And that's how we've just made this business just take off.
Definitely.
Mike, did you want to hit on like any of the verticals or anything like that?
I'm trying to be as useful as we can be to whoever happens to be listening to this right now. The goal isn't to be like, to obfuscate all the information in the book so that you go and get it. The goal is to be as helpful as we can in this short period of time. But there's a lot of nuanced concepts. But adding on to what Gregg was talking about, the reason why earlier I said in my own mind, and I always laugh because when Gregg came back and worked with us, he'd heard, never mind, I won't go on another tangent, but
we like tangents.
Yeah. If you are trying to scale a business and you require all the salespeople to be incredibly charismatic and intelligent, that's inherently limiting, right? You have a lot less humans to choose from. And, and sales is a great profession for a lot of people. So fundamentally, what Gregg was talking about, that middle class, like if you think of a typical Gaussian or a bell curve, and the middle population, by definition, 67% are within one standard deviation, all those people, if you can get them performing more like a top rep, it makes a huge difference to them, their lives, their ability to pay their mortgage, and then that business and all that kind of stuff. And typically, you don't need any technology to get people, assuming you have an ethical product, right? You have something that actually, I don't know how to sell lotion that doesn't do anything, but you get people to want it, right? I don't have any experience in that world, but assuming, you want a pool in your backyard or you want some software and it'll help your business, something that like has a bunch of options that will actually help. There's a fair amount of information that you want to deliver to that purchaser. And then that purchaser is going to naturally have next questions, and that purchaser is naturally going to make different decisions along the way. And it turns out you can take the intelligent salespeople and boil it all down to like a common set of information that you want to deliver as often as you can. Because in sales, strategic sales, you do have a captive audience for like 45 minutes when you sit with them and you go through a sales presentation, different, than marketing or something like that. Like how long do I have their attention for and all that kind of stuff. So you can plan in advance all the information you want to deliver, but to get all those people, like 1,000 sales reps, all doing an excellent job of delivering all the information they're supposed to deliver and doing a good job of listening into what people say they care about. You don't need technology to do that, but it takes a ton of training, right? And then the world changes, the market changes, then you need to change the training. And so it's this never-ending battle of you're trying to bring these people up this learning curve, and then the curve changed, and then you need to bring up a different learning curve, and then they forgot the old thing. And the smartest reps and the most charismatic reps adapt and stay high-performing. But that large middle class, it's harder for them to do that. And so what we figured out is that you should expect technology to absolutely enable that large population of salespeople that are not the super charismatic, super intelligent reps. You should expect the technology to enable that middle class of rep to perform in a much more similar manner to a high-performing sales rep that did a great job of hitting all the points and all that kind of stuff. And you end up with sales enablement applications that are not like what most people are expecting to see. Most really strong sales leaders, they actually don't expect sales enablement software to actually really help the rep that much when they're actually doing the sale. Almost all of the tech out there is for like, conversion rate optimization to get to a good appointment or good qualification, or you did the sales thing. Maybe you remembered to show them. Now, call center stuff will kind of show little scripts and things like that. But in-person sales, there's almost nothing. There's no expectation with senior leadership to expect something to really help them. And so then there's all this tech to like analyze what happened afterwards. Right. But you can actually really enable the rep in real time, which was Gregg's example. Like a regular old human that has an off day, their performance will significantly degrade with the way things are done now. But if you do the tech right, that degradation from them having an off day is much, much less. And with like modern Gen AI tools, not only can you do all sorts of clever things afterwards, just like a good, high-performing, positive sales coach would give you afterwards. Like, hey, great job saying this. You forgot to say that. Now, Gen AI tools will cover that stuff better than an average sales leader, but you can do that stuff, in real time. And we're just now on the cutting edge of figuring out how to use that stuff live, right? Without it being icky and like, and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty neat. If I were one of your students or listeners, or especially like, young, and it's pretty neat, pretty neat time to like, there's a good chance you could literally be on the cutting edge of leveraging this stuff.
And that's one of my questions is a lot of people are scared about AI because they think it's going to take jobs, but AI experts that I talk to, and what I think we're really seeing is that it's going to help us do our jobs better. AI doesn't have the creativity of the human brain and maybe some of the strategy, unless you're thinking about, chess or gameplay, perhaps. AI learns how to beat people, humans. But on the other side, when you're thinking about sales and we're thinking about what people really need, what are the benefits, what are we solving for people when they purchase this product or service, there's that human emotion that still, I think, is tied in, that strategy piece that I don't know that AI will be able to do. But it sounds like in your example, you're really saying AI is a tool for good. It is something that will help people who are salespeople. It might take over some sales jobs at some point, but at this point, it's just really going to help you be a better salesperson. It's going to help you get to the aspects of being able to share the benefits, even if you're not in the right frame of mind. It's going to keep you on track.
100%. Because some sales processes are so complicated. There's so many choices to make. You're going to have a human in there, but imagine AI is going to help optimize that conversation. It'll help that salesperson make more money. That's the end of that's really where it's going to go, right? And people will be happier because we have the database and knowledge is so much deeper, right? You don't have to have a person like me that's been in sales by my gray hair. You can see it for a while. AI is going to be able to help coach at that same level and develop people. So I think when I think about the younger generation, that's why a lot of the old cringe way of selling doesn't jive with them. And I'm glad it doesn't. It shouldn't, because we need them to change the world. And so the only way you can get them to change the world is to help them see this value and to help drive results. It's like, we say the mindset of the person. I'm going to switch a little bit for a second. I was talking about the mindset of the person. When you think about middle class, anybody on your team, if you're looking to hire anybody on your team, we look for somebody who's, first of all, are they coachable? Like, it's so incredible that you need somebody that's coachable. Are they humble and competitive? Might sound weird that I say that, right? In order to be, you have to have this competitive. You got to want to be better in this world. You got to want to change the world. Like, you have to have that desire, right? And so I think that's probably who this podcast is mostly speaking to, are those types of people. And then if you have somebody that's coachable, if they're not humble, they're not going to be coachable, right? The top performers of the sales org, everybody tries to emulate, they're not humble, so therefore they're not coachable. So let them go. We're not talking about changing them. Let them go. Let them do their thing. Don't put them up in front of the salespeople and try to help them sell like this person, right? When people don't feel like they can be that confident. And that's where I feel like the tools, good processes can take that humble, coachable person and make them incredible at sales in a very complicated sales process. I think that's the value of AI coupled with a personality differentiation of the people we're looking for.
Yeah, I would say generative AI, like the current generative AI tools, of which the company that we started, Gregg's an investor, a tech company we started a little over a year ago, is like any other tool. It can be used for good or bad. So can what I learned from Gregg, right? Like the way to, in a straightforward manner, create a good, clear way to explain something that's generally complicated in a series of questions, and then the right text so that an average person can also navigate people through that. That can be used for good or bad, right? You could be selling something to a bad regime or something like, or helping a bad regime do something. So, I don't want to be on a high horse or say that, our generative AI tools are only good or something like that. In terms of, you talked earlier about, people being concerned, about the AI tools and what that's going to mean for their jobs and all that kind of stuff. I think that's absolutely natural and normal. And throughout history, there's nothing but those examples, people throwing their wooden shoes in the machinery because it's their jobs. And I've heard a lot of different sound bites from folks that aren't scared and probably are not as empathetic as they maybe should be to those that are, say things like, look, when the printing press was invented, the people that handwrote books, their job went away. But overall industriousness of humanity leveled up incredibly, right? And so people kind of point to concepts like that. And that's statistically, I'm guessing that's how things will unfold. There will be more opportunities that we can't predict, but it's going to be pretty painful for those that don't adapt, right? And so I would say if you can, if you're listening and you're worried about that, try to hold your worry in one part of your mind and just try to learn the tools in another part of your mind. And approximately the people that learn to use the modern generative AI tools will be okay. It's the ones that don't adapt, that don't use the stuff at all, that'll probably have a pretty tough time. Like I heard somebody else say, generative AI tools won't replace doctors, but doctors that use generative AI tools will replace doctors that don't, that sort of thing.
I've spoken to different AI experts who've created lots of patents on AI technologies, and they all say the same thing. The world is going to be divided into companies that embrace AI and utilize it, learn how to use these tools to help streamline processes. And ultimately, that means that our cost of living should go down. We should have more time for that creative and strategic part of our brains to be able to think up new ideas, new companies, new organizations, new ways of doing things, right? Or the people who don't embrace it and are just scared and they're not going to be in business anymore.
Yeah, let me tell you.
I think Annika is one of the ways, and this is a process that Mike has done with his software engineers. And in fact, we're employing this next week. I have one of his top from Powder AI engineer going on a ride along with me on a sales call. The whole intent is to train the AI, right? So we have that opportunity to train it to what we want it, how we want it to think and process, and how to sell with aloha, right? How to come across well, respectfully, carefully. And I think that's my hope, is that more folks would actually jump into it to help steer it in that right direction, because there's enough nefariousness out there that we need good people who want to do that and drive it that way.
Yeah, depending on where you are in your technological capabilities of employing or deploying like AI tools and models, et cetera, for your own company, you might, say like the last coefficients that were trained on data, was it at a company that I like the way that they do things? Mm-hmm. That they do try to explain things well, and so that's the pattern of recognizing that it's doing? Or is it, some company that tried to flood ads on Facebook all of a sudden and get somebody to buy some medicine that doesn't work, or it's an interesting world, all that kind of stuff. So again, it can be, it actually can be used for good, where it actually, the generative AI models actually look for those right patterns. You did a great job explaining that, and the person gets reinforced, right? Like, and they're more likely to do that again the next time. And like, hey, the way you asked that, it didn't really come across that you genuinely were trying to understand the customer's question or the customer's concerns. It sounded like you were asking a question just so they were forced to answer the way that you wanted them to answer, right? And so generative AI can catch those patterns and let management know, like, hey, you got a rep that maybe they're not doing it on purpose. Maybe they learned it, from somebody. And anyway, there's a lot of neat stuff that can be done with it. And it can help, it can really help a rep get better faster and do the right thing and still be performant.
Well, it sounds really exciting. And I know I'm looking forward to exploring your website more and also reading your book, which is coming out, you said, in about a month or two?
Yes. Yeah, that's right. The latest estimate.
The latest estimate. I love that. And we won't hold you to a specific date, but I want to hear more about, you work together at different companies. Now you're embarking on helping the language modeling for AI to be ethical and to really have a sustainable process as well of helping people perform better, be better at their jobs. So how much of this is in your book? And tell us, how did you decide that your partnership should extend beyond this 15-year friendship and partnership in different businesses and companies, but into like, let's write a book and let's call it Sales Suck?
Fantastic thought. There are many people that I've done business with that I respect, like Mike. We tease each other and have a great time, but we performed at a level together that's, I've never seen anybody do anything like it in strategic sales and how to enable software to make it happen. And so that was our idea. My heart is like, as I'm getting older, I wanted to like, how do I pass down some level of legacy of all the things that I've learned and I've been blessed by my mentors? And how do I pass that good stuff down so that it's not some cliche way of selling? It's literally, it'll transcend generations. I'm 100% confident in that. And so by partnering with Mike and creating this book, that's our desire, is maybe helping change the landscape of sales. And then it's interesting, as you've talked about AI and how the software will help create that opportunity and forever memorialize it. But literally, we have an opportunity in this period of time to train AI to think the right way. And so our book really covers a lot about the process of how to get there. And we're excited to share that information with people and how to scale teams, how to build teams, how to develop teams. When is a good time to, bring in developing your own software as opposed to using it off the shelf software? There's times when it makes more sense and others that it doesn't. But you can create the platform now that sets it up for success. And when it takes off, and it will, that you know exactly what the next steps are.
Fantastic.
So the story of how we ended up working together at the last company is probably a neat story. One, we were building the tech. The CEO that hired my software company, a fair amount of the sales reps through osmosis were most of the new reps, so maybe 150 of them or so, were selling into a similar fashion the way that I used to sell when I was in living rooms using the software that we developed for that company, but almost on accident. Because when I would, when we would go out and train new people and all this kind of stuff, like, hey, here's how to answer this question and use the tool, and here's how to make it easy to sell a roof really quickly, or here's how to talk about if they want a battery and all this kind of stuff. And they were like, hey, maybe the CEO's like, can we, like, everybody to be like just doing a bang up job every single time better than they are, like, can you like create like a new, just super excellent gold standard sales process for the company? And I said, yeah, but I'm pretty busy trying to build the tech for your company, but let me see if the guy that I learned it from, because what that company was experiencing was a watered down version of what I learned, right? Because I was focusing on building the tech with my team. So I reached out to Gregg. Gregg was the VP of sales and one of the founders of a battery company. And I was like, hey, can you help? And so he came in just to help a little bit to get like a new like sales process and a new version of what the training would be. And then as really at that company, we all knew it was kind of see if it was going to be a good fit. And then it turned out to be a good fit. And then he came on at CRO. And then that was when all that growth was that he talked about. So that was a little bit more story, if any of that's interesting or helps, resonate with people and make this slightly more memorable for them in what we're talking about.
I think we're also in a stage where we see anything that has AI on the end of it is getting a lot of attention. But then now there's starting to be a little bit of backlash as well, which is a very interesting conundrum. I think it's the same thing that you see with, like you said, any technology, any new way of doing things. In my world, obviously, podcasts are huge. And yes, podcasting is 20 years old, but we're just at the infancy of this as a mechanism. And it really is an omnichannel form of marketing that you can encompasses everything that you're doing.
And it persists.
And I think AI is the same way, that there are so many ways you can use it. Gratefully, you all are using it for good, but we also say, well, AI has really been around since the 50s. And people just used to call it machine learning and now it's AI, because that's the buzzword. And there are different elements if you're going to be more of the analytic side or if you're going to be the translator, which I didn't even know that was a job, but the person translating like what the senior, the C-suite wants to the engineers who are actually coding and creating. So yeah, I think there's just so many different implications, and understanding the sales part of it and understanding how to be ethical and what you guys are putting together is just, it's really unique.
Yeah, I think it is. And from a sales side and a legal side, so we want to make sure that all of those reps, you have a large sales team, or even a small sales team, if the leadership cannot hear what's being said and done, I promise you it's not what you want most of the time.
Yeah, that's right. The sales rep said, what? And lots of times they don't even know. They
Right. And then I'm sure that we're with some folks out there that there's compliance issues. Like the sales, they said, what? Oh, no. Or maybe that the sales rep said everything right, but the customer misunderstood it. So it's really helping keeping the process on tracks is how I see it right now in what we've developed. And we put some of that into play here just in the last year with some of the pattern AI processes. And what it does, it enables a sales manager because they can't go on every ride along. Think about, if you have 20 sales reps with you and going on ride alongs, all this sort of stuff. Well, now with AI, a ride along is happening on every single sales call. And so you can spend your time focusing on key areas that enable you to coach that sales rep to make them better. And that's the key thing. So now your time is so limited and the sales rep's time is limited. Now I'm able to spend 10 minutes a day in coaching them on the last sales call they just went on, what you heard, and helping develop that rep to be better and better and better. And if they are coachable, I'm telling you, that rep, that middle-class rep is going to be one of the top reps. And that's what AI enables you to do. It just multiplies yourself in a profound way with people saying what you want them to say, not what you hope they say.
Yeah. It's super common where a veteran rep, it takes a year and a half for a typical new rep in that industry to get, to mid-level performance. And why is that? And it's because there's so many of these little scenarios that, oh, I didn't have a good answer for that. Oh, I didn't have a good answer for that. That changed. With generative AI, like capturing it, giving feedback immediately, you can get up the learning curve incredibly fast. Just like the current sales leadership's expectations of how long it should take somebody to get performant, to do an acceptable job in delivering this information to potential buyer. Pretty soon it's going to be, where it's probably a year or something like that. It's going to be a couple weeks.
Wow.
Because every single interaction that you have, every time you sit with the purchaser and you're doing a sales presentation, every second of that can be used to give feedback, to go back and say, according to training, you would have behaved this way, but you behaved this way. Try to remember to do it like this next time. Try to remember to do it like this next time. And so very quickly you get people up the learning curve, which means that, one, the sales rep themselves, they feel better about themselves because they're literally doing a better job, right? Again, assuming they're selling an ethical product and that actually solves somebody's wants and needs, all that kind of stuff. So they feel better. They're more proud of themselves because they really are doing a better job. Going to be making more money because they're making more sales, because they more efficiently help their purchasers understand if that's a good fit for them or not. And so they're probably going to make more money. They're going to be proud of themselves. The purchasers, think of all the humans that have to sit through crappy sales calls, right? Where you go into a car dealership and some pushy son of a gun is like all that is absolutely unnecessary. It's just a coincidence that exists in humanity. It won't in the future. So all those interactions, all that time is given back to all the purchasers, right? All the consumers, all the homeowners, all the purchasers in the software company. They're buying. Anyway, all that time gets given back, right? And so it's good for them. It's pretty neat. There's a lot of virtuous cycles in here where this tech can really be leveraged for lots and lots and lots of win-wins. So it's, I think it's pretty neat. All the generative AI models now, when I was in grad school, right, machine learning. So when we learned what you call a neural network, but they just didn't have, it's not a neural network. So it's just a couple layers and it wasn't that good. They found out later that it put a bunch of layers. It gets very good at predicting, and creating an image off text and all this kind of good stuff. Everything we're talking about is not general artificial intelligence,
right,
like a human, right? Give a human a book on heart surgery and it might have a fighting chance of becoming a heart surgeon, right? Nothing is like that now. But one of the things a human is excellent at, because of, I don't know how many hundreds of millions of years of evolution, is you and I are communicating and I'm looking at you and I say something and some muscle contracts on your face. And in real time, I say something else, right? Because I picked up that the idea, I may not, a mid-performant salesperson or an average intelligence human is probably not going to be able to articulate that I have an imperfect understanding of my own concept. When I verbalize it, it's going to have, it's a telephone game, right? I won't accurately convey the idea that's in my head. You'll hear something You'll also see me. You'll receive a piece of information that will be yet another degraded version of the concept that was in the first person's head. And what humans evolved to do was not understand all that stuff, but do it in real time really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
So like you can have all these tools helping the sales rep just deliver the information that somebody figured out was useful to deliver and say it, just like an actor delivering a script really well. It doesn't sound fake. It's the best way to hear it, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing when people practice saying these things, then they can really pay attention to listening and doing a good job, and they can tell if, oh, that wasn't a good way to explain it. They can try again. So that like, if you do it right, like all this stuff really helps, and it allows the humans to do what they're really good at, right? Which is like communicating in real time and understanding if I did a bad job explaining something, because I'm not trying to remember or I'm not worried about getting my commission. I'm just trying to make sure I do a good job explaining something. And if, depending on your reaction, I might change it anyway. So that's another neat aspect of if you do the enablement right and Gen AI is helping well, it really lets the humans do what they're really, really good at, which is paying attention.
It does. And it allows, I think, if you think about it, allows the engineer, let's say you've got a complicated thing you're selling. So now all of a sudden in that sales call, you have the engineer, you have the CFO, you have the lawyer, right? And the sales leader. Are they hitting those key pieces that it makes sense? And so now we're able to get feedback to the rep immediately and have them trained up and developed in no time. And it's a really powerful tool to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's amazing. But in the process of writing this book together, because that is a different kind of process than working together in an organization, how have you found that? Were there any times that one of you really wanted something in the book and the other one wasn't so sure, and you had to use your sales techniques to convince the other person? Was it pretty seamless?
We just, like everything we do in our own business as well, we hired an amazing writer. We hired good people and a really good editor that took our information and communicated it well. So it's like we hired people because we wanted our voice to come across. And then the same way as we talk with each other on the phone right here in the conversation is we've just learned how I respect Mike and his abilities, and he's a very successful human, and how he's done that is by being a process-driven person. I'm the same way, and so it's reciprocal and respect. And so we've just learned to trust each other in that way. And if one of us feels really strongly and needs to be in there and I disagree with it, I'm going to lean to trusting him, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though what I'm about to say is very similar to what Gregg said. So generally a person would have a likelihood of devaluing it as being a sycophant or something like that. That's not my intent, what I'm about to say. Like Gregg is like a very smart guy and really cares. And it's funny, if there's like a bunch of people in a room and the morale is starting to turn, right? Like a tense meeting or something like that with like a lot of strong personalities and intelligent people, Gregg's like the first person to like do something about it. I'll pick up on it, but because I'm a relatively insensitive human, I'll, like whatever, people they'll be fine. And he's like such a caring guy, but also so emotionally intelligent. Like he picks up and like brave, like does something about it, right? Like gets morale going in the right direction. Like just a kind of an intuitive leader. Humans perform the best when they're in, good spirits and all that kind of good stuff. So he's like, the process has been very, very smooth, right? Like generally Gregg is helpful for me in one particular way, in many ways, but in particular, he'll rapidly conclude on the right forward on communicating something to like a group of people where I'll have the idea, but there'll be many things I think of doing next. And Gregg is fast at like coming to a conclusion on a good way to move forward that will be well received by others and keep people in high spirits and all that kind of good stuff. And also if I'm like over explaining something and Gregg's like, we don't need that. This is, I'm like, cool. Great. I'm glad you were there to help make that decision so I didn't make an incorrect one or suboptimal one. So it's been a good experience, but it hasn't been very dramatic or anything like that. We've worked really well together.
Oh, that's great. And I'm going to put the sign-up list for people to get on the wait list for the book in the show notes, of course, and in my newsletter. But what is that website that people can go to learn more about the two of you, your friendship relationship, and what they'll find out in the book?
Shame on us. It's sales patter. It's www.salespatter.io/sales sucks, I think.
We're not very good at selling.
I did. I remember. It's salespatter.io/sales sucks.
Awesome.
The name
no trick questions here. Just
yeah, sorry.
No, that's fantastic. And I also wanted to ask, and I don't know if you're prepared for this question, but I always like to ask, what is a favorite quote or mantra that you use to get through your day, your life? It can be a family motto. It can be something that's personal or something you use in business.
It's so funny. It just so depends. But I think that at the end of the day, I want to maximize people's potential. And other people did that in my life. And so in turn, I want to do that now that I'm kind of in the twilight years of my business acumen there. I want to be able to just help maximize people just to reach their full potential. And the more limited they feel like they are, that's where I feel like process, and respect gets people from where they thought they could be to here. And just, it lights me up. That's why I get up and do what I do every day.
Right. Thank you for sharing that.
I don't have any quotes or family mantras. Throughout my life, sometimes it's been a discussion on like, hey, Mike, you have a lot of atypical personality characteristics. And I joke, I'm like, being motivated or being industrious must have been advantageous for my ancestors. And now I have a trait of being industrious. For me, it's not a very romantic explanation for my own behavior or something like that. Another characteristic is lots of times I felt guilty for my confidence in going about new ventures because I had a really lucky childhood. I had great parents, and I had no control over that. It's just pure luck. And, I really appreciate that I had a happy childhood and the right amount of unconditional love as a child and the right amount of tough love and all this kind of stuff that made me a functioning adult. And I remember after college, I boxed. I wanted to become an amateur boxer. And the guys that I would spar with, like, I was relatively tough and I felt like I didn't deserve it because I had this easy life, and the guys that I would spar with really had, a lot of them came from pretty challenging backgrounds and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like I can't really offer people that have had a challenging background a mantra or something like that. A lot of it was totally outside of my control, but I also think that the people that come from challenging backgrounds and succeed are about the best kinds of humans there are, and I look up to them. So
can I tell Mike? I'll tell you what Mike says. See, Mike, come on. So one of the things that makes Mike and so amazing what he does is we joke that he has one emotion where most humans have several, right? So Mike has an emotion, right? Or one feeling, let's say. And because that part, and I say it in joking, but literally I've never seen this person get his feelings hurt once.
Wow.
And because he did have too much unconditional love. It's possible, right? That's possible.
That's the joke, right?
But what he does is he helps people discern through their emotions and to make the right decision. And that's what he's absolutely like stellar at. He can listen to the emotion and help people dial it right in there. And so it's very useful with certain salespeople that are a bit more emotional.
Yeah. It's been useful for me as I've gotten older. I'm lucky that I'm as insensitive as I am. Like it's straightforward for me to try to like be empathetic to others.
Like Latch, don't pay so much attention to how you feel. Just do the next right thing.
Yeah. My absolute being isn't very useful because, somebody's like an actual solution to a problem lots of times is you're feeling perturbed and that's lowering your efficacy for any problem that you want to solve. So step one is cease experiencing perturbation, right? And
you want to call him a cyborg? I don't think fully human.
It's straightforward, but very difficult to act on for a lot of people. Whereas like that, my dad didn't speak that with those words, but his actions were sort of like that, right? Like, hey, you done being upset? Because we still got stuff to do, that sort of thing. So, it's useful sometimes. So,
well, I can see, Mike, I'm glad that you're on the side of good, not evil.
Yeah, the joke
Very
is
much so. And that you're bringing forward what the two of you have birthed together and co-created on your different sides in the book for people to learn from in Patter AI. And I'm sure that you have more projects and more ideas that you're going to be bringing forth. And I'm looking forward to seeing what those are and how you guys continue to co-create. So I really want to thank you for being here today. This has been a really fun and engaging conversation. I love the two personalities, and I can tell how much respect you have for each other. And I love that you've been able to use that respect and both of your strengths to create things that other people now can use and learn and understand from and be better at their jobs and their livelihoods. So with that, thank you both so much for being on the show. And I will have everything in the show notes for people to get a hold of you and to also get on the wait list for the book. And we'll have to have another conversation, 6 months, a year down the road to see where you're at now, how the book coming out has transformed what you're doing, the way that you're working, and what else has been going on in the world of Patter AI and whatever else you have created at that time.
Look forward to that. Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks a ton for having us, Annika. Hopefully we were helpful to people listening to this.
100%. Thanks so much. Want more? Check out amplifywithannika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithannika.